Now, whenever we want to talk, we can talk.
This is what regret looks like.
Hi everyone, today is a very special day. We're going to be talking about a piece of public technology infrastructure that's going to revolutionize the Indian fintech industry. We have with us Aaryaman today, who's a serial entrepreneur and investor. Aaryaman is a part of Ispirit. So Aaryaman, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Ispirit is?
So Ispirit is a non-profit technology think tank that aims to build technology and technology platforms to solve for some of India's biggest problems, namely logistics, healthcare and financial services.
Could you give us some examples where Ispirit has come up with something revolutionary when it comes to India?
We have a term called India Stack, which refers to a suite of technologies which help India go presenceless, cashless, paperless, all with user consent. So presenceless means how can somebody authenticate their identity without physically being there. So the Aadhaar platform comes in here. It's a set of open APIs which you can use to prove your identity. So 650 million bank accounts have been opened have been linked with Aadhaar. And this is important because in 2008, India had a banking penetration of 1 in 8. 1 in 8 people have bank accounts. 2018, we have 1 in 3, roughly speaking.
Okay.
So that jump that happened in 10 years would have ordinarily taken a country 48 years if we had followed the normal trend line of countries as they became financially included.
Okay.
We were able to do it in 1/5 of the time because Aadhaar offered this set of this public infrastructure which banks could use when onboarding customers. So Aadhaar is the presenceless layer which allows people to, as I said, verify identity. The second layer is UPI, which you guys might have probably used somewhere. So UPI is the cashless layer which allows people to transact digitally. UPI, I'm not sure if you're aware, recently crossed 1 billion transactions per month. So it's already higher than the entire throughput of American Express. And soon we'll probably be at 1 billion transactions a day, higher than Visa, MasterCard and any other sort of private payment system.
Presenceless is something which saves a lot of your time and effort. Cashless is something which makes you far more efficient. The third bit that you mentioned was
paperless layer. So how do we make data digital so that people can move data in a more efficient manner?
Seamlessly.
When
I wanted to get my KYC done, all I needed to do was just answer an OTP and that's it. Otherwise, I would actually need to go there and fill in my details.
Right.
Now that we have people who have bank accounts, we have people who are making transactions and generating data. Basically, this is really important information because banks decide on whether you'll get a loan or not. How is what you're doing right now going to leverage that?
Good question. So, now we have several 100 million Indians who have bank accounts. You might have heard the phrase technology, data is the new oil.
Correct.
And I think what that phrase is trying to get at is that data is super valuable. And it's valuable for companies that own the data, which so far has been the likes of your Facebooks, etc., who use the data about you to either provide ads, so they sell you to the ad publishers, or they sell things to you using your data, like hey, check out this, check out that.
Correct.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to empower people with that data. So data empowerment and protection architecture is the name of the new system. Okay. Data empowerment means how can individuals or small businesses or enterprises take control of their own data to make sure that the value from that data comes to them. And data protection means how can I make sure that my data is more secure and I have absolute control and visibility over how my data is stored and accessed.
Okay, my data is going to be protected, which means it's more secure, so I have to take a little less tension. And the second thing is data empowerment, which means I get control over what kind of data I'm sharing with which kind of people.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example for why it's important for data empowerment to take place. Let's say that I have one bank account, and in that one bank account, I do everything. If the bank is the only lender who I'm talking to, they might give me a loan at 10%. But if I can take my banking and financial history and instead share it with 5 people, we'll compete and I might get an interest rate at 8% instead of 10%.
Wow, something like free markets.
Yeah, like if data can share more freely, then theoretically, according to economic theory, there should be more efficiency and more choice for consumers. Today, you can share your bank data, of course. Like if I want to download my bank account statement, I can download it and I can share it, but it's not a frictionless process. It requires me to download something and then re-upload it, or it requires me to give my net banking credentials to some company which will scrape my account, or it requires me to give authorization to a company to go through my emails and SMSs. And none of this is particularly secure or efficient to turn that unstructured data into structured data that can be used by anybody. Another overhead is that each bank has their data stored in a different format. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the friction in this by standardizing all types of financial information across all the different banks, etc. So today, if I'm giving SMS, parsing to somebody, if I'm allowing somebody to read my SMSs, I can't control which SMSs they read and which they can't read.
Exactly.
But tomorrow, I can say that, hey Gaurav, I want to give you access to see my bank account, but I only want you to see the transactions that I do with Swiggy, for example, or any other kind of arbitrary logic. You can now query a cell in the DB instead of taking the entire table.
What are some of the use cases that you can see when you provide this kind of a platform?
Well, as a developer, just imagine that financial data is going to become available to you. Basically, any entity regulated by RBI, SEBI, or the insurance regulator or the provident fund regulator. So as a developer, I can build an application that, let's say, reads my credit card and bank transactions and UPI transactions and creates an expense tracker for me from all my different accounts in one place. Or I can create like a wealth management app that has my information again about my stocks, any other mutual funds, any investments I've invested in addition to my actual how much is in my bank account, my current balance, that sort of stuff. So
there's tons of apps which are actually trying to find out your spending patterns and trying to give you advice that, hey, you spent too much on travel this day. And the kind of permissions that they have is just scary. But this can really help bring that down. What we're thinking about this platform is a set of APIs which people can end up using there.
Absolutely. It's a set of open APIs. You can go online and read the specifications. It's an open system. And I'm very excited about it because I can see that there's just this ocean of data which is going to become available to developers.
I mean, Aaryaman has written an article on this. Be sure to check out the link in the description below for that. Right now it's under development from what I understand.
That's right. So January will be a developer launch.
Oh wow. So, yeah. That's the date for us, yeah.
And sometime in the middle of the year will be the full citizen launch when citizens can begin exercising this level of empowerment over their data.
Okay, that requires a significant effort from the banks, I'm sure.
Yes, and they are very close to being completely ready. So
oh wow.
The major
guys, to 2020.
Most of the top banks are on board and the system is progressing quite well.
Hopefully this is going to change the landscape again, just like Aadhaar did.
Or UPI.
Or UPI, yes. Next we'll be heading to how the system is built. Aaryaman, thank you so much for explaining why we need this system, and thanks so much for your work in Ispirit.
Thanks, Gaurav.
So now we have Sid with us. Sid is also a volunteer at Ispirit. Can you tell us a little bit more about the origins of DEPA?
So a couple of years back, while we were building out the India stack, right, what we noticed were Indians were becoming data rich. So in the West, let's take the United States, when their users became data rich, they were already economically well off. And so data was fundamentally used in markets like the United States to shape their spending patterns. And that's a hugely profitable and powerful business model, right? Now, these same set of companies, while they have some of their largest user bases in India, draw relatively piddly amounts of revenue, right? And that's because at scale, Indians don't have money to spend, right? We're still a developing economy. And so a few years back, we thought, could we invert this entire paradigm of where data is used to sell things to the user into a new paradigm where data is used to empower them to access better financial services by bridging the trust gaps, eliminating the information asymmetry in the market, to access better health services, and so on. And in order to do that, you've got to give them control. And so control actually gets manifested through consent. So if you look at the UPI architecture, it's actually a 3-layer cake, right? So you've got NPCI, which is the National Payments Corporation of India, which runs our ATM networks and other financial switches. But they also run the switch in UPI, which is in an interoperable manner, they connect to all the banks.
Okay.
Then you've got, in the second layer of the cake, regulated entities, which are the banks where customers' money resides. And then on top, you've got the third-party innovators, which are PhonePe, WhatsApp, Jio, Beam, etc. Right? And so it's through this three-layer cake through which we'll go about solving the hard problems in India. Recently, I was applying for a US visa. Right? I had to physically go to my bank branch to take a 6 months printout with the receptionist signed. Why couldn't I give a one-click, hey, here you now have access to the last 6 months bank account transactions?
What we are going to do now is talk about how do the different entities in this ecosystem talk to each other. Let's talk about that architecture.
Yeah. So we've got the user out here. It might be an individual or a small business, both of whom have various data sets linked to their identity. On this end of the spectrum is essentially the custodians of your data, financial information providers.
These are the banks.
These could be banks, mutual fund depositories, insurance repositories. The customer now wants to share their data with what are called financial information users, folks that are consuming the customer's data to give them a better service. It could be, let's say, an app that tracks your cash flows, helps you plan your expenses and your daily budgets and spending. So it could be a personal finance management app. It could be a lender, a robo-advisor that's able to programmatically make recommendations. Could we actually create a system where the user at a click of a button, in a safe, secure, privacy-preserving manner, fetch their data from wherever it resides and share it with whomsoever is giving them access to better services? In order to do that, we had to unbundle the consent from the FIP, from the custodian. We couldn't give it to the FIU because the FIU has really, since they're also consuming your data, we all know how that plays out, right? Hashtag Cambridge Analytica. So we said, hey, we can't give it to the FIU. The FIP cannot create diverse enough experiences and multiple front-end experiences to capture my informed consent. So we unbundled that out and created third-party fiduciaries called account aggregators. Much like PhonePe, Google Pay, WhatsApp, they just manage your permissions to your bank account where your money is sitting with, say, SBI Bank. So you can go to an account aggregator, register, link where all your data resides, and this happens through standardized APIs. So the API interfaces between every FIP and every AA is standardized by RBI. The API interfaces between every AA and FIU is standardized. So think of it kind of like a pipe within which different data packets, encrypted data packets flow.
Just to clarify, when you say you're going to send encrypted packets and it also has a standard API, the information inside it will be encrypted, not the entire packet, I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, your data is encrypted, the channel is encrypted.
The channel is also encrypted.
Yeah.
How do you ensure then that this data is coming in the proper format or in that schema?
Yeah, so that is something that happens through certification. Okay. Right? Because it's end-to-end encrypted, the AA cannot look into it and create any sort of ETL on it, right? So every module that gets implemented by an FIP gets certified before going live in production. When I register with an AA, I'll get a handle, let's say SID at AA1. I'm going to a lender who's going to give me a 3-month loan for which he needs access to my data. So I said, hey lender, here's my account aggregator ID, right? And so in real time, I'll give him my AA ID, and in real time, the lender will raise a consent request on my AA, saying, hey, this is the data that I need in order to process Siddharth's loan offer. So it's very granular. It's based on a set of principles, the way the consent is structured, called organs.
This is a good acronym. Can you please explain? Yes.
Yes. O in organs it's an open standard. Right? So this was published way back in 2016 by the Ministry of IT. It's an open standard which was subsequently adopted by the Ministry of Finance and all the financial sector regulators in India. Out of that came the account aggregators. The second part of it is R, which is revocable. So every consent that I give, I can always go back and revoke it. So I could give you consent to access my data, let's say it's a PFM app, every day for the next, say, 180 days, but then I can go back to my account aggregator and revoke that consent. G, the consent is very granular. So there are actually 3 levels of granularity. Store. Let's say I'm sharing my bank account statement, so I can consent to have you access my entire bank account statement. The second is what we call query, right? Where I can say, hey, if all you want to know is, do I have an average balance greater than 10,000 over the past 6 months, then why do you need my entire transaction statements? But instead, I can only consent to share the output of that query, which is a yes/no response to, did I maintain a minimum average balance greater than 10,000? And the third, which is slightly futuristic, these two are what are currently operational, is called view. Instead of data moving to the code, could we create an environment, a virtual data room, where the code is brought to the data, where code and models are brought, you compute locally on that data in a very privacy-preserving environment, and only the insights are what are taken out.
Wow, that's like machine learning at the spot of the data.
In some ways, yeah. So that is a broader direction the world's moving towards, learning happening on the edge and only the insights traveling back to the mother model. And we do expect more of that to happen, but it's still early days.
Yeah, it's like a big advanced version of the query model where you're...
Exactly. That's correct. Because now you can run any queries and even more complex queries. So the G in organs is granularity. A is it's auditable. So every time consent's created, data is shared, structured audit logs are generated. N is notice. So just like when money leaves your account, you get notified, right? In the new paradigm, when data is shared about you, you'll be notified as well. And S is it's secure. So the entire data flow is end-to-end encrypted. So the entire consent artifact, which is essentially the standardized file that AAs generate when you say, hey, I'm saying yes to consent to share my data, is based on these principles. So now the FIU, going back, has raised a consent request. The AA at this point in time receives the structured consent request and shows to the user saying, hey, do you authorize it, yes or no? So if I click yes, in real time, digitally signed consent artifacts are generated, which are sent to each FIP. At which point in time, the FIPs will verify the artifact, validate it, fetch data from their internal systems, right? So they receive the artifact, they'll go fetch data from their internal systems, then digitally sign that structured data, encrypt it, and return back the encrypted packet, which the AA then forwards to the FIU. So the FIU now receives this data, decrypts it, validates a digital signature.
So the entire system has been decoupled really well, especially an individual like me. There's just one thing I need to do, just say yes.
Yeah, or no.
Yes.
Both, yeah. So in this entire framework, data continues to remain at source with your custodian. The AS cannot store data, right? So think of them as a postman, right? They get a request, they send the envelope to the FIP, who puts in data into that envelope, seals the envelope, passes it back to the AA, who will then pass it back to the FIU or the customer, as the use case may be.
Right, so this system seems to be far more consistent because you're actually asking the FIP for data instead of keeping it with yourself, which might be stale.
Yeah, so we didn't want, firstly, one common central store of a billion citizens' data, right? Especially in the context of finance and health and education, right? Because this is extremely sensitive information. Also, there are a lot of real-time use cases of this data, right? So let's say the lender also wants to monitor, right? Wants to monitor my cash flows. And if they want to do that, then I'll authorize recurring consent saying, hey, every week you get access to my cash flow information, right? For the next, say, 12 weeks, which is the duration of the loan, right? For which you do need the latest copy of the fresh data, right? So the lender will then send the consent request, which the user has approved already. So it's a recurring consent. So the AA will then go to the FIP, fetch the latest 1 week copy, and then forward it to the FIU. So the entire system is completely interoperable, right? So any account aggregator can talk to any FIP, right? And there is an index of all of this. Think of it, we call it the registry, right? Where all the endpoint URLs and IPs and other things are mentioned, much like DNS, right? So through this, the AAs can discover who are all the FIPs on the network and send, because their public certificates are a part of it, send digitally signed requests to each FIP, right? So that way an AA does not have to go into each FIP and configure its IP and so on, which is not scalable. Same for the FIP, right? The FIP is receiving a request, can look up the registry, say who are the authorized AAs, check their public certificate because it's a digitally signed request, and accordingly respond back. And same between the AAs and FIUs, right? Who are also part of the registry, so it's interoperable. So if I'm a consumer, right, whichever AA ID I may give, the FIU will then be able to send the request to the corresponding AA.
So guys, while we were filming this, just before the release, there's something which is very serendipitous which has come up, and that is a big hackathon which is going to be around the DEPA system. So I'll let Aaryaman tell you more about this.
Thanks, Gaurav. So yeah, guys, actually, Sahamati, which is a collective of all the account aggregators in the ecosystem, is hosting a hackathon on in July 2020 rather. It will be a 4-week-long virtual hackathon, and registrations end on 1st July. So definitely sign up before then. It's going to be a huge event in Indian fintech, we hope. Basically, the idea is to raise awareness about the account aggregator system and get developers and entrepreneurs to learn about how they can utilize this. So there'll be like a ton of master classes and mentors who will show you how to build on top of the AA APIs. There'll be access to sandboxes where you can get data and use it to actually build apps. There'll be lots of talks about UI, UX, security, and things like that for this new paradigm. And at the end, there will be presentations, prizes, and awards, and a great opportunity for hackers and developers to learn about this and also present their ideas to a panel of great judges, including people like BG Mahesh, who's the founder of Sahamati, and Amit Jain, who's the managing director of Sequoia Capital. So all around, we think it's going to be a fantastic event, and we would love for all of you guys to participate. So please make your way over to the link in the description and sign up by July 1st.
And of course, this is entirely free, so it's best to give it a shot. Thanks, Aaryaman, for coming along. Thanks to Sid also for making this happen. Unfortunately, we had to shoot this during Corona, so you can see our two faces. No longer we couldn't shoot this in the same physical spot anymore. So, but awesome. Looking forward to the hackathon. See ya. Best of luck, Aaryaman, and best of luck to Ispirit.
See you guys. Thanks, Gaurav.